Hey, Seattle hockey fans, our team, the Seattle Kraken, officially on our first winning streak of the season. Can we make it last? Let's talk a little bit about that, but mostly we're going to talk Firebirds on this Friday episode of Locked On Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are the Seattle Kraken.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I am Erica L. Ayala, your host of Locked On Kraken. Thanks as always for making us a part of your daily destination. We are the only Seattle Kraken podcast coming to you Monday through Friday throughout the season. Seattle Kraken get a pretty nice win over the Nashville Predators. And if you are an everydayer, then you know we had the one and only Ann Kimmel on the show yesterday. If you're watching or listening for the first time, whether on the Sirius SXM app or on your favorite audio platform, or if you're watching on YouTube and can see me waving at you and beautiful downtown Tulsa behind me, welcome. Ann and I did our Squadcast or Squidcast episode, and there were a few things that I said the Seattle Kraken would need to do in order to get a win. Talked about how Philip Grubauer is probably going to get the start and that he needed to have a good game. Check. Talked about how the Seattle Kraken needed to be leading the game into the third period. Check and check. Here is the statistical breakdown. I'm going to show this on the screen for those watching on YouTube. And if you're not watching on YouTube, no worries. I'll walk you through it. So you can see that the Predators actually led in shots on goal and a few other statistical categories and all this kind of advanced stats and math that we'll talk about in a little bit. But we won where it counted, and that was in the final score. So 4-2, the final score here. You see that the shots on goal, 34 in favor of Nashville, 31 for the Seattle Kraken. First goal by the Predators, scored by Tony Novak and assisted by Sissons, who we talked about on yesterday's episode. Had a little fun comparison with him. Go listen to that episode or check out our social media if you don't know the reference to Miss Maine / Miss Universe. The next two goals, though, would be scored by the Seattle Kraken. Oliver Bjorkstrand and Jared McCann. Beautiful, just beautiful goals. The McCann goal, you got to give a lot of credit to Yanni Gourde for getting things done. Roman Josi would score the second goal for the Predators, and we would once again lose a lead, but in short order, Brian Dumoulin got what ends up being the game-winning goal, and Vince Dunn locked it up in the third period. You can see faceoffs were in favor of Nashville as well, but the Kraken won a pretty important faceoff that led to the Dunn goal, and that's more of what we want to see. That's more of what we know the team has been focused on. So quick little stats there, but I want to take you to the post-game analysis by friend of the podcast, the one and only Allison Lucan. And naturally, Allison, the data-driven storyteller that she is, did a really great job breaking down the sports logic data. And you saw a lot of people after the game, if you were on social media, talking about quality start, talking about goals expected, talking about the Nashville Predators should have, air quotes, won the game. And there are a few stats that stood out to me from what Allison Lucan wrote in her post-game analysis. I'm going to show you on the screen. But here's what I want to talk about. Here's what Alison Lukan talks about in this article where she uses the Sport Logic data. She talks about the Seattle Kraken winning in important areas such as shot volume. So although we didn't have as many shots on goal, we had 53.66% of shot volume and 51%, just over 51% of shot quality. She also talked about rush chances, 10 rush chances for the Seattle Kraken, 5 for the Predators. And Ann and I did talk about playing in transition as one of the things that we thought was going to be important in this matchup. So again, Alison Lukan giving data behind the vibe check that Ann Kimmel and I were talking about on yesterday's episode. Then it goes to, there's Sport Logic, and again, in the post-game analysis that Alison Lukan gives, she often talks about what is a quality start. And again, I'm going to go to something that Ann Kimmel actually wrote, and we'll talk about that in a minute when it comes to goaltending and quality starts. But this is the third quality start per the data source for the Seattle Kraken, for Philip Grubauer in particular. He saved 1.9 more goals than expected. And I mean, that's basically 3 goals right there erased for the Predators. And had they gotten those goals by the statistical, I don't know, analog, I don't know, what is it called? Not analog. What am I trying to say? Algorithm. Some word that starts with A. Take your pick. The algorithm. Had we been true to the algorithm, the Predators probably would have won this game. What we can take away as Kraken fans is that this was a game that looked better than what we've seen. The first period was rough, but it's a much better looking, a much better feeling game than we've seen. There were still some hiccups, including the fact that we gave up a lead once again. But I said that I wanted to take you to something that Ann Kimmel wrote. If you don't know, Ann Kimmel is the contributor to the hockey news when it comes to the Nashville Predators. So Predators lose 4-2, Kraken statistics and perspective check. And I think what's interesting is if you scroll down to the end of this article, was this a bad loss or a bad feeling? And I think it's such an interesting question. Of course, this is coming from the opponent's perspective, but I appreciate Ann asking that question because whether I use the same language on the Locked On Kraken podcast or not, I feel like I've been asking this question of the Seattle Kraken. Was it a bad loss or just a bad feeling? Are we, down and out and downtrodden, or are we just disappointed? That was a conversation that we've had, right, on this episode. Or on this podcast, in previous episodes. So Ann writes, the loss last night might not be so disappointing if it didn't feel vaguely familiar. On the one hand, you have a team that made it to the second round, was 1 game away from making the Western Conference Finals. But I kept telling you, whether it was in the off season with some of the moves or lack thereof, or even what I was seeing at training camp, I just wasn't seeing things come together. I've been watching Lessons in Chemistry. Great show. Brie Larson, huge fan. Anyway, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it comes from the perspective of a chemist who enjoys cooking and cooking is chemistry, but really leans into the chemistry terms when it comes to cooking. And so you talk about, there was this great scene where she's talking about why food tastes better the next day. They just needed a little bit more time to crystallize, is the term that they used on the episode. It's just so good. Anyway, if you're looking for a new TV show, check out Lessons in Chemistry. And the Seattle Kraken, this is probably going to be the title of this show, Lessons in Chemistry. Because we're still building chemistry. I talk so much about the Tuckman model, and I talk to you a lot about chemistry, not like molecular biology and stuff like that, but people, personalities, leadership, and the chemistry of that. We're going to leave that, though, for next week. We have a game on Saturday, and if you want to know more of my thoughts about the game, lead up to the game, all of that stuff, I highly recommend that you become a part of the Locked on Kraken Insiders on subtext by texting 918-731-3154. Again, that's 918-731-3154. Not only will you get the full interview from Dan Bylsma, I'll play a little snippet of that later in the show, but also I will be giving you effectively kind of like a bonus podcast, a game day podcast to get you ready for our matchup against the Calgary Flames. I actually, and this is specifically for the insiders, I shared with you something that I felt after Philip Grubauer took a penalty. And I shared with you something that I didn't want to share publicly because I know that the Grubauer crew, he's got a lot of very, very loyal fans. But I just felt that there was something amok, if you will, about his reaction to the contact. But you don't have to take my word for it. Here's Philip Grubauer in his own words on whether he was truly injured or was perhaps embellishing. Here's what Philip Grubauer had to say after the game.
Taking penalties a new part of your game?
On my game?
Just
that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Well, you do take a penalty though, right? Do you feel an added pressure to make those next stops?
No. Yeah, I just got a little caught there. No, it's same as any other, right? Sometimes it's kind of awkward not being able to sit in the box there but taking the penalty. So, but yeah, no, there's no added pressure. Like same mentality. You got to stop everything, right?
Were you dinged up a little bit, or were you also trying to get a little sympathy on a call? Or
wouldn't you like to know?
Combination.
Next question.
What's it mean to you?
I knew it. I told you, Locked on Kraken Insiders. I knew it. Coming up, we're going to talk Firebirds, and we're going to hear from head coach of our AHL affiliate, Dan Bylsma. Today's episode of Locked on Kraken is brought to you by Parkview Advance. As a business owner, you realize there are times when receivables might fall behind, but that doesn't mean you need to fall behind on vendor payments, payroll, or even rent. For more than 25 years, Parkview Advance has helped businesses secure working capital. From $5,000 to $1.5 million, Parkview Advance can help approve your working capital in as little as 24 hours. It's a much easier process than you might imagine. We invite the many entrepreneurs that are Locked On NHL fans to learn more by calling 203-675-0071. Or you can visit parkviewadvance.com. That's PARKVIEWADVANCE.com. If your business needs working capital, call Parkview Advance today. Parkview Advance, helping businesses with their working capital. Go to parkviewadvance.com for more information. Another step to a successful business is hiring the right people. And if you need the right person and the right people to build a winning roster, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Find top talent with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. Hate waiting? Indeed's US data shows that over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed matches their job description the moment they post a job. So, what we want you to do is go visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring today. Just go to Indeed.com and you can help find the right people with the right skills to make your business take off. Indeed knows that when you're doing everything for your company, you can't afford to overspend on hiring. which is why you definitely need Indeed. So head to Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application, pricing of it not available for everyone. You need to hire? Then you need Indeed. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Mentioned it on yesterday's episode, but you can also find not only the Locked On Kraken podcast, but also the Seattle Kraken broadcasts on the Sirius SXM app. Just search Kraken and you can find the hometown broadcast, John Forslund, JT Brown, friend of the pod, Allison Lucan, was between the benches last night and will be there again on Saturday, tomorrow. So make sure you check out the Kraken broadcast and Locked On Kraken on Sirius SXM. And as promised, we're going to get into the Coachella Valley Firebirds. Now, I mentioned that the Firebirds maybe kind of have a similar road as our NHL team, the Seattle Kraken. Through 6 games, they have 4 wins, 2 losses, but they've had to score a decent amount to be able to get those wins. And I mean, yeah, we're still, looking for that many wins. We've got a 2-game win streak going right now for the Seattle Kraken, but it was a little bit of a difficult road in their first few games. The Coachella Valley Firebirds couldn't string together any wins either. Dan Bylsma said he felt that the 10-31 win, even just putting aside the 8 goals, was the closest to the expectation that he and his coaching staff had for the team. Of course, Jessica Campbell, a part of that coaching staff. You're going to hear from Jessica Campbell probably next week on Locked On Kraken. You'll hear from Jessica Campbell and my interview with Jessica Campbell much sooner if you are part of the Locked On Kraken Insider community. But talking about expectations, I asked Dan Bylsma about expectations at training camp. Had a one-on-one interview with him, had a great conversation with Dan Bylsma. I want you to hear a little bit about what he had to say about expectations. But before we get to that interview in the next segment, I want to just go through where the Firebirds are. I talked about that win against the Abbotsford Canucks, the 2 wins that they were able to string together against the San Jose Barracuda. But it was a bit of a rocky start. I mean, if we look at some of these, it was a 3-2 loss against Bakersfield to open up the season on October 13th. They got shut out by the Tucson Roadrunners. They shut out the Tucson Roadrunners on the 21st, but then they lost 1-0 to the Ontario Reign on October 25th before getting those back-to-back wins against the Barracuda. Right now, the Western Conference champions are 6th in the Pacific Division out of 10 teams. The Silver Knights at the top of that list. So there's something in the water in Nevada, apparently. But we're behind Bakersfield. We're behind on the Ontario Reign. We're behind Calgary and Abbotsford. So we've played Abbotsford already. I talked about Ontario. Bakersfield we've played already. So and the Roadrunners and the Barracuda. So, it's still early in the season, 6 games in for the Coachella Valley Firebirds, but in hearing their post-game media scrums, which they're live streaming now on their YouTube channel, the audio is sometimes a little bit choppy, but I appreciate the effort. It makes it covering the team a lot easier. You can tell that they just weren't feeling the chemistry. They weren't feeling the chemistry. They weren't meeting the expectations. And that word expectations is going to keep coming up when I take you over to my interview with Dan Bylsma. And yeah, there are a lot of expectations. 1 win away, went to overtime in Game 7 from a championship in their first ever season. Those are high expectations that everyone outside of the organization has. So when you're not meeting success and you're middle of the pack right now, kind of what's going on? Is it too early to panic? Yeah, it is. But it's worth doing the mental exercise now to rejigger and make sure that whatever is not serving the ultimate goal, that you figure it out. Before we move on to the Disco Dan Bylsma interview, which I'm super excited to share with the Locked On Kraken Insiders in its totality, we have a special YouTube link that we have. So I will send that to you via text message. That's how we communicate, Locked On Kraken Insiders. So you'll get that a little bit later. You'll also get the link for the bonus episode, the game day episode that I'm going to do, getting us ready for the Calgary Flames. But here's what we need to know. Points leader. This is a little wild to me. I had to double check this because I wasn't completely sure I was reading this correctly. Our points leader has 27 points in 6 games. That seems like a lot. And that's Mitch Reinke. 5'11", 181 pounds, right shot defenseman from Stillwater, Minnesota. 27 points, 26 assists, one goal. That's insane. I'm stuttering because I genuinely don't know what to say. 6 games and 27 assists. Goals for. So he has assisted, according to the AHL.com, the Coachella Valley Firebirds have 27 goals for. Reinke has 27 points. He's literally been a part of every single goal in 6 games. That seems like some effective puck-moving defenseman if I ever. So yeah, we're gonna keep an eye on Mitch. Our goals leader, the one and only Mr. Death Glare himself, friend of the podcast. He's been on the show. Shane Wright. A lot of people really liking what Shane Wright is doing. 6 games, 4 goals. He leads the team, not in points. That's Mitch. He leads the team in goals. And yeah, you probably figured out who's leading in assists. Who's leading in assists? It's Mitch. It's Mitch. He has been a part of every single goal for the Coachella Valley Firebirds through 6 games. I know, probably a lot of people want me to talk about Shane Wright, but I just cannot. I'm having, what? That's wild. That's wild to me. Chris Drieger. We know about Chris Drieger. Locked On Kraken Insiders. I told you that I gave you interviews from all 3 goaltenders at training camp because I knew training camp and preseason because I knew things might shake up a little. So you heard from Joey Dax, you heard from Drieger, you heard from Philip Grubauer. If you're part of the Locked On Kraken Insiders, Drieger really said he was looking forward to playing in the NHL. He's playing in the AHL, but he's got in 5 games. He's played 5 games. He's got a 182 goals against average. Save percentage is a 936. Alice Stedska also was at training camp. Just had the 1 game played. And goals against average, a 385. And save percentage, 871. Now, Jack LaFontaine was with the Coachella Valley Firebirds for a little bit, but now he's with the Mavericks. I don't know if we're going to see any mix-up here. I mean, you've got Chris Drieger. He's got NHL experience, so you're pretty good in net for now. But if and when Chris Drieger comes back to the NHL, I think they're probably going to want – I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is I'm curious to see if Stedska stays with Coachella Valley. It seems like maybe you need someone a little bit more reliable with Chris Drieger. So maybe we do see Jack LaFontaine come back to Coachella Valley and Stedska go to the Mavericks. Let's keep an eye on it. But like I said, the Mavericks are coming to town, not next week, but the week after, and I'll be there working out some ways to catch up with the Coachella Valley Firebirds and should know soon when will be my next Seattle Kraken game, whether that's in Seattle or elsewhere. But I'll keep you posted. Coming up next, my interview with Disco Dan Bylsma on this Friday episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is an opportunity for you to take control of just your overall mental wellness. And you can talk about things that maybe throughout the year have been weighing heavy on your mind. Maybe there are things that are impacting you on a day-to-day basis to the point where you just want to be able to talk to someone and get some perspective. You might be struggling with seasonal blues. This time of year can be a lot, and it's natural to feel some sadness or even anxiety about it. Therapy, though, can be a bright spot. And amid all of the stress and the changes, there's so much happening in the world. And I don't even know what's going on with you all individually and personally. And I know I've got stuff going on personally as well. You know, you might want to just get grounded and get the tools to manage everything that you have going on. If you're thinking of starting therapy, I say give BetterHelp a try. That's what I'm doing. I'm literally doing it. So I'll have more to say once, I'm going through the intake process. It hasn't even been 24 hours yet, about 24 to 48 hours, they say, before you're matched with a therapist based on some of the, like I said, intake process that they have. Find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNHL to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNHL. One of the things that I really love to do, and that I've made as a personal goal for myself, is to give you more interviews. I know we did a survey on YouTube. You want more interviews. I love doing interviews. So I want to do more interviews with players and coaches and people that have been impacted and touched by the Seattle Kraken organization. And so some of those I'm still planning, but I did speak to Disco Dan Bylsma. And so we're going to close out today's episode with him talking about and reacting to my question about, as he said, expectations. That's kind of the word of the day, other than the catchphrase of the day being lessons in chemistry. He talked about expectations and how you set expectations based on the external expectations because of how the team finished last year. Here's a little snippet of my conversation with Disco Dan Bylsma.
I think we established, the energy, the pace, and the speed that we want to play at, and it's a competitive game, and it needs to be played at a high competitive level, and take a little bit from what we guys did last year and with that foundation and have it a part of our team this year.
It's going to be taken by surprise, and there's a pretty lengthy scouting report now on the squad.
Yeah, and that's you're talking about expectations, and I think the expectations now are for us to be a good hockey team, and that's something that we, as a group and as an organization, we have to meet and exceed those expectations, and our guys in CV can't rest on last year's success and what kind of team we were last year, or getting into the finals and losing in Game 7. We have to pick up and build back from the bottom, build a new foundation, a different foundation for our group. That's really one of my, Jessica and I were talking about what some of the pitfalls we could have this season, and that our guys have to put in the work and put in the effort to get back to where we were last year.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Great interview.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I'll take that mic from you as well. That's our show. Tomorrow's a game day, and I have a bonus episode coming for those who are a member of the Locked On Kraken Insiders on Subtext. If you want to be a part of that, remember to text 918-731-3154. Again, text 918-731-3154. If you're not already a part of the Insiders community, you'll get a 14-day free trial. You can always text STOP if you no longer want to be a part of that. We've got our game day threads. I open up to how I think maybe Philip Grubauer is embellishing a little bit. And of course, you'll get the interviews with Dan Bylsma, the full interview with Jessica Campbell that we'll have on next Friday's episode, and so much more. So all of the interviews, all of the one-on-ones, whether I'm at training camp, whether I'm in Tulsa with the Kansas City Mavericks, whether I'm on the road catching the Seattle Kraken, or if I make my way to Coachella Valley to see the Firebirds, you'll get all of those firsthand interviews first. But I'm going to end the show as I always do. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. And we hold fast, we stay true, and we say loud and proud, especially on game day, let's go Kraken. I'll see you on the next episode. Peace.